Here is a true-life story outline based on the title you provided, expanded into 3 complete and engaging parts without any headings. The desert wind swept across the sprawling military training facility, carrying with it the fine, gritty dust that seemed to get into everything. At the long-range shooting complex, a group of elite Navy SEAL candidates and instructors had gathered for an open training day, a chance to refine their long-distance engagement skills. The atmosphere was thick with the usual competitive bravado, a symphony of clicks and metallic slaps as high-powered rifles were set up on their bipods. Among the sea of men in multicam gear, one figure stood out, not because she was trying to, but because she was a woman. Sergeant Sherry Gallagher of the U.S. Army Marksmanship Unit was there on a cross-branch training rotation, a chance to share knowledge and learn from the best. But as she walked towards the firing line, carrying her M16A2 service rifle, the whispers started. They weren't kind. A group of SEALs, huddled around their massive .300 Winchester Magnum rifles with optics that cost more than a used car, watched her approach. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a thick beard, looked at her small frame, then at the standard-issue rifle in her hands, and let out a loud chuckle. "Whoa, check it out," he said, nudging his buddy. "Little Miss Army brought her pea shooter." Another joined in, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Hey, sweetheart, you lost? The kid's range is back that way. That rifle's bigger than you. You need a step stool to see the target?" The group erupted in laughter, the sound harsh against the desert silence. Sherry stopped and looked at them, her expression calm and unreadable. She didn't flinch, didn't blush, and didn't fire back with an angry retort. She simply adjusted the sling on her rifle, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. "This old thing?" she said, her voice even. "She's all I need. But I'd be happy to learn from you experts. Maybe you can show me how it's done out at 1,000 yards? Her calm invitation was met with more smirks. They took it as naive confidence, completely unaware that the woman they were mocking was already a world champion and held more national records than anyone on the range that day combined. The stage was set, and the taunts had just lit the fuse. The range officer called out the first set of distances, 600 yards. A standard yet challenging distance that separated casual shooters from serious marksmen. The SEALs took their positions, their massive rifles looking like pieces of advanced artillery. The wind was picking up, a tricky cross breeze that would make any shot a gamble. One by one, they fired. The sound was deafening. Spotting scopes were trained downrange, and the results were mixed. "Good hit!" someone yelled, followed by a groan of frustration from another shooter who had pulled his shot wide. It was a typical training day. Then, it was Sherry's turn. She walked to the line, her movements fluid and practiced. She lay down in the prone position, the M16 looking almost diminutive next to the Magnum rifles on either side. She didn't rush. She adjusted her position, felt the wind on her cheek, and read the mirage rising from the hot desert floor. The SEAL next to her, the one who had made the step stool comment, watched with a condescending grin, expecting her to struggle. The report of her rifle was noticeably quieter, a sharp crack compared to the booming thunder of the larger calibers. A few seconds later, the spotter's voice crackled over the radio. "Impact! Center mass! That's a 10!" A couple of the SEALs raised their eyebrows. Beginner's luck, they thought. The next target was 800 yards. The wind had picked up even more, gusting unpredictably. The SEALs fired again. This time there were more misses, shots lost to the swirling dust devils. The atmosphere grew more tense, more focused. Sherry settled back into position. She took a deep, calming breath, exhaled half of it, and held. The crack of her M16 sounded again, small but definitive. The radio crackled. "Hit! Dead center!" A murmur went through the crowd. The laughter had stopped. The SEAL instructor in charge, a grizzled veteran who had been silently observing, walked over to Sherry's position. He didn't say a word, just looked through his spotting scope at her target, then back at her. His expression was one of pure, undiluted respect. He simply nodded and walked back, leaving his stunned team in his wake. The taunts were gone, replaced by a heavy, uncomfortable silence. The young woman with the pea shooter had just outshot a line of America's finest warriors in brutal conditions, but no one knew that this was merely a warm-up. The real test was still to come. As the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the desert floor, the SEAL instructor made an announcement. "All right, listen up. We're pushing it out. Full distance, 3,200 meters." A collective hush fell over the group. 3,200 meters is not shooting, it's artillery. At that distance, the target is a mere speck, invisible to the naked eye. The Earth's curvature and rotation come into play. The wind can vary at different altitudes along the bullet's flight path, pushing it around like a leaf. It was the realm of the extreme, and the SEAL's powerful magnums were built for this. They set up their massive rifles, looking through high-end ballistic computers and wind meters. This was their world. Sherry, however, remained calm. From her pack, she didn't pull out a different rifle. She simply checked her M16, the same standard rifle she had used all day. The SEALs watched in disbelief. One of them opened his mouth to say something, but a stern look from his instructor silenced him. The instructor walked over to Sherry. "You sure about this, Sergeant?" he asked, his voice low. "At this distance, that round is going to drop like a stone. It'll be in the air for over 4 seconds. She looked up at him, her eyes steady. "Yes, sir, I know my rifle." The first SEAL took his shot. The thunderous boom echoed for miles. They waited, the silence agonizing. "No impact," came the report. Another SEAL fired. Another miss. The wind was a monster, unpredictable and brutal. One by one, the mighty SEALs and their incredible rifles failed to find the target. They were frustrated, their confidence shaken. Finally, the instructor looked at Sherry. "She's up." Sherry moved to the line. The pressure was immense. All the earlier mockery hung in the air, but now it was replaced by the weight of expectation. Every eye was on her. She didn't see the smirking faces anymore. She saw only the data in her head. She calculated the wind speed at the muzzle, the estimated wind at mid-range, and the almost incomprehensible bullet drop of over 400 inches. She took her position, her heart rate slowing to a calm, steady beat. The crosshairs of her scope weren't even on the target. They were held high and to the left, compensating for factors that seemed to defy physics. Her finger took up the slack on the trigger. The crack of the M16 sounded almost insignificant in the vast, open desert. Then came the wait. 4.5 seconds of silence, long than anyone in attendance had ever waited for a shot to land. It was a lifetime. The SEALs held their breath. The instructor stared intently through his high-powered spotting scope. Then, a tiny puff of dust, right next to the target. A near miss. A groan started to form, but before it could escape, Sherry, without a word, adjusted her aim by a hair. She fired again. Another agonizing wait. This time, the puff of dust erupted directly on the target. A perfect hit. The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't just a hit, it was a statement. She had just shattered the unofficial SEAL distance record, not with a custom-built $1,000 round, but with a standard service rifle and sheer, unadulterated skill. The SEAL who had first taunted her walked over, his face a mask of humility. He offered his hand. She took it. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "That was incredible." Sherry simply smiled, gathered her gear, and walked away, leaving a group of shell-shocked warriors in her dust. She hadn't come to embarrass them. She had come to train, and in doing so, she taught them the most valuable lesson of all, that skill, dedication, and an unshakable will have no gender, and that a true professional lets their results do the talking.